Hello and welcome back to another episode of our weekly Tea Break series here at the FT Studios in London alongside my co-host Yuri Bender. I'm delighted to say we have a very special guest, Adrian Karatnycky. Adrian is a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council think tank. He was president of Freedom House, developing assistance to democratic and human rights movements in Belarus, Serbia, Russia and Ukraine. He also advises governments and families about investment issues. Adrian, how are you?
Pleasure to be here. I'm well.
And what tea have you gone for today?
Well, I'm just in from New York, so I need some coffee because jet lag sets in at very odd hours.
I mean, I have to disappoint everyone today. I've gone for the coffee after last week's backlash, but we move, I guess. Yuri, what have you gone for?
Well, I think there's more to it. I know you disappointed some of our Chinese viewers last week by singing the pleasures of Indian tea and saying this is by far the best in the world. But I think with Adrian, you want to avoid any associations with Trump's Tea Party as well, I would have thought.
Well, the Tea Party is now long gone. There's some new agglomeration and a new branding, and it's a little bit different, actually, because the Tea Party guys were also kind of fiscally conservative, and here this is a stimulus and deep tax cuts. So it's a little different than balancing the budget. It's a different Tea Party, so to speak.
It is a different Tea Party, but people are still talking about they're trying to forecast the policies, and they're looking at these so-called Trump trades and which equity sectors will benefit. Ali, one of your articles this week was actually about European equities and how Trump's tariffs would affect them. What did you find in your research?
Well, it seems to be that Europe is at some sort of crossroads in this new world order since Trump's re-election, and that's shaken investor confidence in Europe. There's a kind of a fear of renewed trade tensions between Europe and the US, and surplus countries like the Eurozone, for example, countries in the Eurozone, they could suffer a growth hit from what I've heard. And then there's two catalysts in Europe as to what could start this potential revival. And one of the catalysts is the German elections early next year. Yeah. The outcome is going to be very, very important to kind of set the tone as to where Europe goes in the future. And the second catalyst is what happens to Ukraine. Trump has boasted a lot about, he doesn't start wars. If he came to power, he'll end the war in one day. And of course, ceasefire will increase that confidence in Europe.
But this solution, this potential settlement, this catalyst for Europe's future, which Ali's referring to, what do you feel that potential settlement will look like, Adrian?
Well, the first thing I should say is that the only way you're going to get a settlement is if there is a tough alternative for Putin. If Putin understands that the U.S. is not negotiating and then willing to sell out the Ukrainians, and also that he understands that if he doesn't settle, that there is, a stick rather than behind it rather than a carrot. So it seems to me that there will have to be robust financing for Ukraine's defense, and I think that the Trump team will have to, and some of them have already intimated this, will have to come up with concrete steps that they will take to give Ukraine more firepower and more capability if Putin doesn't make a deal. And to the Ukrainians, they're going to say, if Putin's willing to make a deal and you're not, we're not going to continue financing it. So they're going to try to squeeze both parties. I think the Ukrainian public in polling shows that while they will never relinquish the claim for the territory Russia currently holds, they are prepared for a settlement as long as it provides for the country's security, and will seek diplomatic or political solutions to the return of these territories.
Who's the European leader who's going to be instrumental in kind of negotiating this peace? Ultimately, it will be...
Well, a lot of leaders are weak, and the leaders who have a mandate are also having some political troubles, like the British Prime Minister. But I think he's in a stronger political position than say Macron is. Maybe Merz, if he becomes the next chancellor, will be an important voice. And very interestingly enough, someone with whom Trump influencer, if we could use that term. Elon Musk is smitten, is Giorgia Meloni. There was a whole flurry of gossipy stories about how he was, admiringly looking at her way at the dinner of the Atlantic Council in New York City, where she was receiving an award and he presented it to her. And it was this kind of fawning worship of her. And she is one of the strongest Ukraine supporters. And of course, he is for kind of moving on from Ukraine. So maybe Meloni will be one of those Trump influencers along with Merz. I think the fact that it's likely that there were these two center-right politicians, they may have, even though they're far. I mean, even Meloni is not as far right, I would say, as the on social issues as Trump world is, and cultural issues. But I think they probably have a better. They're on the same wavelength, at least, as the Trump team. And so I think they may turn out to be the most important components of moving Europe and the United States closer on some issues.
Adrian and I were actually in Kyiv at the same time earlier in the autumn when we were both attending the Yes Summit, which is hosted every year by Viktor Pinchuk, the famous oligarch turned philanthropist, with a lot of global politicians attending that meeting. There was one particularly interesting late night discussion, which I mentioned in the article. We're in the hotel basement and the air raid sirens are wailing outside with the typical Russian Friday night drone attack with the Iranian Shahid drones. And we're talking in this room about the battle between democracy and autocracy with the author of The End of History, Francis Fukuyama. So it was quite a symbolic moment. And the notion of these two blocks, an autocratic one involving China, Russia and Iran, and a liberal democratic cohort of countries led by the US, including Europe, Southeast Asia and Japan. This was what investors were talking about before the Trump election. Is this a viable lens to observe economic and trade development, Adrian, or will this be totally upended, this old order, by Trump's accession to the White House?
I don't believe it will be totally upended. I think there is a lot of affinity between like societies and societies that are organized roughly on the same political principles. Now, of course, there's a bit of, there may be some slippage. There is some slippage among the liberal democratic countries in the direction of more, I'd say, authoritarian ideas and more authoritarian rule. But I think the basic principle of competitive elections and some degree of independence of the judiciary holds in most of these even societies that are trending in the wrong direction. And I think that because of China and the U.S.'s requirement to have reliable allies to meet the Chinese challenge, the U.S. will have to find some kind of a reliance on Europe, even to take on this very large economic and political power. There has to be some kind of consolidation among the democracies, some inroads among the democracies in Asia and East Asia, and Trump will have to find a way of. And I think one of the mobilizing principles is shared values. He doesn't like to speak on those kinds of terms. I think he views everything transactionally, and if he can get something out of an authoritarian, he will happily make a deal, and he may construct a less comfortable coalition. But remember, at twilight moments of global conflict, the U.S. the Allies made a bargain with the Soviet Union to fight Nazism. I'm not comparing the Chinese to the Nazis, but I'm saying when there is a big struggle, sometimes the democracies gather additional allies. And certainly during the Cold War, we had a lot of unsavory right-wing regimes that were part of this mix. So it's actually more typical than atypical that there isn't simply a block of well-run, well-heeled and exemplary democracies, it's often a lot messier, and these coalitions are probably going to be messier with Trump, because there'll be fewer, there will be less of an imposition of, quote, values onto our alliance structures.
And it's interesting to look at the UK's position in this dynamic. And Ali, we had an article by Mark Akerson about wealthy families leaving the UK, more and more entrepreneurs leaving here. Why are they leaving, and where are they going, Ali?
Well, Mark argues that the UK's non-dom tax changes may kind of drive wealthy families to leave, impacting government revenues. He says the new regime creates uncertainty, potentially encouraging short-term stays where investors exploit tax-free gains before leaving. And he argues that the UK's approach may be less appealing to countries like Italy, and also where they have better schemes there, he argues. But he also sees the UAE and Switzerland as more attractive destinations. Adrian, you've been coming to London for more than 40 years. Is it a sort of place you would like to live in, or has it kind of fallen behind New York and other major capitals?
Well, I mean, just for variety's sake, I love London. I love the energy, and of course, remembering pre-Thatcher Britain, it's certainly a more comfortable place to visit in many ways, and in many other ways, maybe not. I think there's even a drift. New York, in the micro world of American politics, and that narrower discussion, there is the same kind of a shift where people are looking to places where there is more free spirit. So Elon Musk is moving from more what he regards liberal, expensive, Bay Area, San Francisco, pulling up roots and moving to Austin, Texas, which, even though it used to be a liberal city, has now become this great magnet for conservatives that are. I think conservatives love the liberal lifestyle, but they don't love the liberal values. I mean, the drift may be of people who are entrepreneurial, who want to have as much money that they're able to reinvest to grow their wealth fabulously and to accomplish things, more so than I think just preserving generational wealth. Certainly among the super rich, but among the millionaires rather than the multimillionaires and billionaires, maybe the calculation is if the tax rate is too high, you have to find some other place. But again, I don't know how these people live, but I think they're more motivated by a kind of their mission and their entrepreneurial megalomania, so to speak.
But also their legacy, Adrian. And you've mentioned the generational shift, the generational handover, and succession planning for families. It has been a major focus for us in our coverage.
And it was a great TV series too.
It is a great TV series with many colourful characters in there, and based largely on a true story of a tycoon.
But planning is always a good idea.
It is, and that's an article we had this week from my colleague Elisa Travato about empowering the next generation. And I was thinking about this, Adrian, when reading your book. This is Adrian's latest book, Battleground Ukraine, just published. You write very vividly about all the former presidents and oligarchs whom you knew personally. And I look at your section about the rise of the oligarchs, and the way you describe them is fascinating. This young, ambitious and ruthless generation of 20 and 30 somethings were rapidly pivoting to the legitimate acquisition and the occasional forcible takeover of industrial assets. That was in the early 90s. But the generation we have now, the generation that the Ukrainian president Volodymyr Zelensky belongs to, which you describe later, more of a generation coming from the IT sector, from the creative industries. How do you feel the mentality of this new generation of the politicians, oligarchs, and army generals differs from that of their predecessors? And will they make more of a success in running the country?
Well, I think, the main thing politically that is different is that these people grew up in the post-Soviet era, and for them the idea of anything but an established Ukrainian state is something unnatural. All their adult lives and their conscious lives have been spent in a country that existed, and now it is being challenged. So Putin attacks at precisely the same moment that there is now this majority of the population that only lived in their in their childhood and in their or through their entire lives under an independent Ukraine, and so that has created a kind of a glue. You bond. You have an idea of the geography of your country. You have an idea of the values of your country, of a kind of a patriotism and so on. So I think there's that element, but also I think that the people who are self-made, who are not so, all they want is non-government interference. They don't want government special favors. They have a different kind of a philosophy. And I think that they have created a lot of energy. I mean, you think about WhatsApp, PayPal, these were all created by people who left Ukraine because they left Ukraine when the older oligarchs were still there and they couldn't find a way to realize themselves. They quickly came to the West and very quickly came up, very talented people. So some of these people are resident in Ukraine. Many of them are honing their skills, their technology skills around the war. But as we know with companies like Palantir, algorithms that are useful for war can also be useful for management of companies, and the tools that are being created and refined in artificial intelligence have applications along a very broad spectrum. So I think there's a lot of energy there. I also think that these people, they didn't require. They grew kind of naturally. They didn't seize assets. They built incrementally assets, and so they are against corruption. They don't need state capture. They just need the state. They're more concerned with the rule of law than with state capture, and so that over time should have a benefit for the Ukrainian economy. Not to speak of, if there is peace, the great energy that you saw in many post-war societies that try to recover. There's a release of energy, with some help, but Britain went through a rough patch after the war, but then there was a period of expansion. Europe moved slowly, and then with Marshall Aid support was able to grow. So I think we should be thinking about Ukraine in that kind of pattern. And I would say, the oligarchs are diminished because many of them had assets that have been basically seized by the Russians. So a lot of them have lost some of their oomph, their coal mines, their steel mills, and so on. So yes, they have a lot of capital, but and I think there is a danger here that if the West and investors from the West don't come in the rebuild, that some of these guys will repeat what they did before, which is buy assets on the cheap when no one was willing to go. They got rich not only by stealing, but because you could buy a steel mill for $5 million. And no one in Ukraine had $5 million, but a handful of people who had done some dodgy and maybe criminal things. But no one from the West was willing to bid on these assets. And they built multi-billion-dollar fortunes on them. So the hope is that Western investment will come in, that people will understand that there is a dynamic generation.
As you say, there is that new generation of entrepreneurs with very prominent positions. And after all that energy being released that Adrian has talked about, I'm really glad I've got my chamomile tea to calm me down.
Well,
really.
I need more energy, so I'm drinking my coffee. So.
And I've gone for the coffee as well. But on that note, Adrian, thank you so much for joining us today. A really pleasure to hear your insights. That's all we have time today on our episode of PWM Tea Break. For me, Yuri, and the PWM team, see you next week.